Welcome to a brand new episode of Work Inspired, a podcast where we bring together entrepreneurs, executives, and thought leaders to talk about work, change, success, and growth. On today's episode, we have not one, but two founders here to tell the story of their award-winning agency, C+C, as well as how they're aligning their passions with their profession to make the world a better place. Please welcome Julie Colehour and Bryan Cohen. Julie, Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show. So excited to have you here and to hear a little bit more about C+C.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Let's start by, anytime we've got entrepreneurs on, I love to hear the growth story. This show is just as much about you as it is your company, but because you're such an important founding part of your company, I'd love to hear kind of how C+C came together and some of the kind of milestones in your careers that led up to the formation of the business.
Yeah. So one of the things about us that's fun is that our careers have been sort of intertwined a little bit, which makes for, those good opportunities where we get to say, hey, do you remember when that thing happened? And we say, that was great. Or, oh my gosh. So let's go back in the time machine to the 1990s. Julie was a vice president at a agency in Seattle called Elgin Seifert, which was later acquired by DDB and turned into DDB Seattle. So she hired me in 1996 to work on the Energy Star account that they had just won. And that is where Julie and I started working together. Fast forward to 1999, Julie went to another agency called PRR, and I joined her a year later. And then at PRR, we worked together. I think Julie was there 6 years and I was there 5. And then from PRR, we left and started C+C in 2005. And now we are here on your podcast.
Wow. That's wonderful. I love that history. And tell me a little bit about C+C. I know you're a PR firm, but give the listeners a little overview about what you guys are and
Sure.
how you're set up.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So when we started C+C in 2005, it was with the concept of, could we create an agency that just focused on social good work? And could we do that in a way where we were focusing both on the public sector and the private sector? We had been working at the agency before C+C that was really focused on public sector, and we liked the concept of taking this skill set and applying it into the private sector. So back in 2005, it was literally Bryan and I at his kitchen table trying to see if this proof of concept and business model could work. And I think the answer is yes, it definitely works. We're at 70 people today. Wow. We've got offices in Seattle, Boston, and Portland, Oregon. We're about 50% in terms of public sector work and private sector work. And we only do mission-driven social good work. So the concept was proven, but it's taken us, we're 15 years in, we grow about 15% a year. It's been a slow, steady growth to get where we're at today.
And George, not to derail you right off the bat, but we're here just to talk. I think that one of the interesting things about C+C and about sort of like Julie and I's history and start is it's like, who you pick as a business partner, it really matters. It's a top 3 decision of life. And Julie and I had worked together twice. So a lot of the challenges as owners that we face, this idea of like, can the two founders work together? We never have really had to deal with that because we already knew each other. We had a relationship. And we knew that we could actually work together. And that has made a lot of the hard stuff and a lot of the big stuff kind of, I think, work better. So lesson number 1,
I'm glad you brought that up, Bryan. At our organization, our CEO and our president have been together for many, many years.
Yeah.
From past companies up to this one, and I love watching them work together because they're very aligned, but in many ways they also are kind of yin and yang. Like they each complement each other with their skill sets. Is that the same with you guys, or are you?
We have been definitely described as the yin and the yang. Yeah. So there's different skill sets on each side, but it's very complementary and it works. And we know that about each other and it works great. But I will echo what Bryan said, like agencies fail because business partners can't get along. I mean, that's one of the key reasons you'll see, small to mid-size agencies failing. So getting that right from the beginning is pretty important.
Especially when your tagline it's all about the good, right? It's going to be hard to focus on the good if there's infighting or problems at the top. So I think that is important. Let's talk about social good for a minute. I think especially I want to talk about what it means in the corporate world, but how do you define social good? I think that would be helpful just to set the stage for my questions to follow.
At C+C, our purpose is to take care of people and the planet. So that's really how we define social good. And, that's pretty broad, but any work we have to do has to be making our communities better, has to be improving, making them strong. And it has to have some sort of function that helps people or helps the planet. And if it falls into that bucket, regardless of who the client is, we will definitely consider taking it on. We have plenty of discussions when we look at business opportunities of, do they fit that mold? Are they mission consistent? Is this the organization we want to work with? And, if the answer is yes, we will, but we also turn a lot of things away that really don't fit in that mold.
Gotcha. And let's talk about the responsibility of social good, because you guys are working, I think, with a lot of for-profit organizations, correct? Mm-hmm. I think as you consider the social good being good for the most amount of people or good for the world and the environment, that makes a lot of sense when you're talking to a government organization or a not-for-profit or a religious institution, maybe. When it comes to a corporate organization that's for-profit and focused really on making money, why is that important?
Well, I think what we're seeing with a lot of our for-profit clients is that their customers, their consumers, their stakeholders have an expectation that they are going to be doing some kind of work in the community to protect the planet, to address social issues. Like, it's part of the making money. They're not opposed to each other. It's becoming more and more part of being a good brand.
Yeah. We like to say, I think integral to our business model and where we think our clients need to be living is that, doing good is integral to doing well, right? You can't separate the two things anymore. This idea that, you're not going to be in business for a long time if you aren't helping and being a good community citizen with whatever your business is. And so if you can't figure out how to do that and do it authentically, you're not going to be successful.
But George, here's the trick about that. And here's where the C+C, I think, shines. And that is that you've got the doing good factor, right? And it's really important to the customers. But with that, the work itself, the work of the agency, it has to be awesome. Like the work has to be done in a way that inspires, that encourages, that empowers, and not ends up sort of like shaking a finger at people. Like people, like customers and consumers need to feel like they have skin in the game with this brand and that they're empowered by the brand.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because I think when you talk about a company that does good, when you think about that as a company you want to work for, or a company you want to associate yourself with as a customer or as an employee, I think it's an easier connection. I think when you think about it as like a stock price, from a shareholder perspective, is there a direct correlation? And it sounds like from your experience that yes, there is, that the companies that focus on social good do well. and not just well for others, but well for themselves. So I think that that's an important, get that out of the way. And now we can talk about, all right, let's do the exciting stuff like brand and attracting the right team and that type of a thing. So let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, how does social good, DEI, how does that impact or foster a strong and effective work culture? Is that something you talk about with your customers?
Yes, all the time. I mean, I think that, a key part of companies retaining their employees is having a strong culture. And a really important part of having a strong culture is having social good built into it and having a very deep perspective on DEI and really working to, move forward on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think companies that aren't doing that or are resisting that, their employees see that. It's a recipe for unhappy employees that are going to leave and go somewhere where they feel they're at a company that has values that match their values. This is the wave of the future. Any company who's pushing against DEI is going to have trouble in the long term. So they need to be embracing it and not seeing it as transactional. It's really a different way of thinking in terms of getting the organization to really embrace the principles.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys? I think when you talk about brand, that's the corporate level, right? You're talking to leadership, you're talking to marketing, you're talking about how is it communicated. In some ways, though, is it also a combination of corporate and people? Are you putting together programs that really involve the employees of an organization and tap into their passions and tap into, the individuals to say, this is really who we believe, this is really what we believe. We're authentic because not only do we say it from a brand perspective, but we live this. Is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that's happened is that I think that employees, right, they have a lot of choices, right? Especially, and that's in this sort of like, for us in the PR branding world. I remember when it first started, you either worked for a company, a nonprofit, or at an agency, and you did communications. But now there are so many different opportunities within communications. There's social, there's content, the government relations. There's the actual production of video, of audio. Like the opportunities are multiple. And the thing is that we are fundamentally a talent-driven organization, right? Like we don't have coffee, we don't have cars. I mean, we drive cars, but we're not selling coffee or selling cars.
Right.
So for us to have great talent and to have people who want to work for us and want to come work at an agency, like that culture piece, it has to be dialed.
And it's the same for our clients, right? A client has to be authentic. You can't just be out in social wash, like greenwashing, right? You have to have, so just like we have a purpose, take care of people on the planet, we encourage our clients to have a purpose. What is your purpose? And the purpose just can't be anything. Purpose needs to align with their business in some way, right? So that it makes sense. And if it makes sense, it's going to make sense to employees. And then you have to infuse that purpose through your employees and into your culture. And then it's authentic and it makes sense, right? So it has to be something that's integrated into everything that they do.
How I that's a really interesting thing to think about, Julie. Does the purpose, the idea of good, does it have to be core, intrinsic? Does it have to be fundamental to the organization? Or can you just say, we know who we are, this is what we do, we understand our why, but we also want to give a little back. We want to do a little good. How important is it that it's, is it at the center, or can it just be kind of layered on the top?
Yeah, no, it can't be the charity project off to the side. Okay. It's got to be core. So companies need to start thinking of it as core. It used to be, I'm going to be a, private sector company really driven by, shareholder value only, and maybe I'll do some cause marketing on the side, right? That's the way we used to think about this. It's not that way anymore, and consumers are too smart for it, right? So you need to find a purpose. It doesn't mean your purpose has to be all encompassing and everything, but find a purpose that makes sense for your business, and then it has to integrate throughout. And therefore it'll be authentic and you can truly drive it in your culture. Otherwise, your employees are going to know that you're just doing this as a side thing. Your customers are going to know you're doing it as a side thing, right? If it's not integrated and authentic, you can't, it'll be known.
Here's the thing about being an entrepreneur, about being a founder. Like, most of us lead with our hearts. Most of us lead with our passion. Like, why not have a purpose, and why not get all in there? Like, lean all the way in. Like, because that thing is infectious. That's the things that customers see. That's the thing that employees see. Like, love on that purpose. Make that purpose the thing. That's where we see people being super successful, not going the other way.
Yeah. Let's say, you guys obviously started your organization with that purpose, with that in mind. That was kind of almost the differentiator with your agency, right? What advice do you have to companies that maybe were more traditional and that they did just support certain charities and they always talked about good, but that wasn't really at the center of who they are? How can they shift to be a little bit more authentic and wholesome about it?
So I think I would start by asking the question, like, what are we doing for our community? Why do we all come to work every day? What is the impact we are making? And what is the social good that's part of that impact? So if the company says the only thing we care about is making money, that's it, period. In my opinion, they won't make as much money and they won't be as successful because they're not focused on a purpose that is helping community, right? So I do think any organization, any for-profit organization, should have a purpose, should know why they're in business, why they're coming to work every day, and, build that into their business model. And if they do, I think they'll actually make more money in the long run, because I do really believe that you can do better by doing good than just having a focus solely on profit.
Gotcha. What are some of the things that you guys do at C+C? It is kind of like leading by example. Like, what are some initiatives that you've put in place that are working well that you almost kind of use as a showcase when you talk to your clients?
You want to take that one, or?
I was going to let you start.
Okay. I was just talking. You can edit that part out.
Well.
Yes, at C+C, walking the talk is really important. And I will say that if you don't, our employees tell us, right? We have very active, engaged employees who, it's not just the owners that own the culture and own the mission. It's everybody that works at C+C. So that's really great. One thing we started back in 2006 is a very concentrated effort on DEI. And what I'll say about DEI, we've talked about this already a little bit, but it is a journey, and it requires everybody that works for us to sort of self-educate themselves and understand, DEI, what it means, how various team members on our team are impacted by DEI issues, how we might be impacted by client issues on diversity and equity and inclusion. So really having that understanding. So back in 2006, we started by training everybody in the company to kind of level set. And then we've continued by having a internal DEI team that right now is about 20% of our staff serve on the DEI team to help ensure we're moving along where we want to be in terms of improving the diversity at our company, looking at inclusion, looking at equity issues, looking at issues of racism in the workplace, and how to identify things that are systemic racism. So it's even to the point of like, if a client does something that's a concern from a racism standpoint, what does that employee do? How do they react? And how do we react? And so really getting down to, in order to make change around racism, you have to be willing to confront it, identify it and confront it, and have hard conversations. So really digging deep. And I will just say, big caveat, we are not done with this yet. This is a journey, and I don't think we'll ever be done, because this problem is so big. But the willingness to have the hard conversations and identify things that come up and address them is something, as a company, that, we're super proud that we're on this path, and super proud of the employees that are helping us lead down this path. That's
awesome. Yeah, when you talk about, racism, or you talk about, some of these issues, they just trigger an HR, feeling for me, and you said hard conversations and obviously when there's a problem in the workplace that needs to be addressed, that goes without saying. I'm interested though, Bryan, you had brought up like, it's got to be from your heart, right? Like when you talk about the desire to change and the desire to do good, and the desire to be better. I wonder, is the HR issues aside, when you talk about bringing the right people into your organization or keeping the right people at your organization, is social good something that you can train, that you can educate, and anybody can get there? Or do you really need to look at your organization and say, we're gonna put together a group of people that do align with these values?
Well, we've been really lucky. I mean, people respond to the mission, and they have really since we started, and they want to do this kind of work. They like the clients, they like the type of work. And so that training piece, we oftentimes learn from our employees. Like one of the things I was going to say. So to answer your question, people tend to be drawn to work with us who want to work for these kinds of organizations, both on the government side and the nonprofit side and the for-profit side, right? Like that's happening, which we're super lucky about. But I also think that part of from the heart piece around these issues, it's like that we listen. Like when employees come to us and say, hey, this thing is important, we need to get on top of it, Julie and I try and make that happen. And so a good example is we have had a series of pushes around a bunch of different issues where we have offered to match people's specific gifting. So if an employee comes to us and says, hey, I just want to give to this group, we'll match it. We'll match it right to the group. And that creates a situation where employees feel like we are hearing like their concern and helping them sort of make just a small improvement in an area that they're worried about. And to me, that's the kind of stuff that really matters.
Yeah, it's. I love this conversation because for obvious reasons, we don't talk politics on this show. You can talk to a very conservative person and a very liberal person about the exact same thing, and they can be the best of friends, but they'll see the exact same issue in completely different ways. But what I'm hearing from you is on the idea of social good is that you believe, and you're seeing that people are intrinsically good, and this is something that anybody can get behind. And it's initiatives, it's culture at an organization, it's the way you communicate that brings it to the surface and makes it shine. So I think it's a very optimistic perspective, and I like it.
Well, I mean, listen, we have a lot of people who have worked for us for a while, and then we get to meet young people. And part of the thing about agency culture is, as people get hired in, they bring new ideas to the table. And our job as leaders is partially to listen. Like, hey, this is a great idea. Like, let's make this happen here. Let's empower someone to make this thing happen here and support them. And, part of our ethos, part of the Julie Bryan thing is we want to back the employee as much as we possibly can. Remember what I said earlier. I don't have coffee to sell. I don't have cars to sell. I just have talented, passionate people, and they have to feel empowered.
So empowering teams, listening, having empathy for the people at your organization, giving them a place. Bryan, are there other kind of characteristics that you've seen when you work with your clients that successful companies that lead with culture share?
That's a good one. Yeah. I have seen a bunch of companies that lead with culture, and that, it's cool. It's cool when you see it in the for-profit marketplace. We see another place that we see it a lot is with our financial co-op clients. Right? Because the thing is that financial co-ops, they have members rather than shareholders. And they're much more dug into the community. So it's like, the things like that first car loan, right? Getting people into their first house, helping people get to college. Like that to me is some pretty cool stuff. And it's sort of like it's woven into the framework of how, like a financial co-op works.
Sure. That's awesome. Julie, I want to talk about a project you recently kind of led, the COVID-19 Washington Massive Communications Campaign, because I think first of all, it's very timely. We're still dealing with the pandemic, early 2021. Hopefully, end is near-ish. But tell me a little bit about that campaign, and then I want to ask you some questions about how we might translate some of that success into other things that aren't necessarily pandemic related.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started working with the Washington State Department of Health last March. We're almost actually at our 1-year anniversary for that work, right when COVID hit. And the thing that we've been able to do on this account is to really apply behavioral science principles to this challenge. So this challenge was, how do we get people to adopt specific behaviors that are preventative for COVID spreading, like wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart, gathering only in small groups, all those sorts of things. And how do you get people to actually adopt those behaviors and really create a social norm around the behaviors in a community? And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is a different challenge in many ways than the challenge of like selling a product. When you're trying to change a behavior, there are different things happening. And so we were able to really apply those behavioral science principles to figure out, okay, what are the barriers that are stopping each of those behaviors? What are the motivators and benefits we can offer to people to overcome those barriers and actually get them to adopt the behaviors? One of the really great things about this particular account has been our ability to do research. So we've been able to do ongoing research throughout this because, as you know, this thing has changed constantly, right? The ball keeps moving down the court on this. It's not like you can focus and stop and do something the same for 3 months. We have to constantly be changing things up based on what we know, the new science, the new information, and the new asks that we have for the public. So how do we keep the public on track? So we've been doing ongoing, both quantitative and qualitative research to inform all of our messaging and our advertising in this campaign. They're also very, very cool. We have done this in the most inclusive way and accessible way of any client we've ever worked with. This campaign is being done in 36 languages, which is a staggering number. But prior to this, maybe the most we've ever done is 10 or 11 on a single client. So that's a really big lift. But in addition to that, we're also reaching a lot of different communities that maybe aren't traditionally part of big efforts like this. And that's been a great thing to infuse into the campaign to ensure we really are reaching sort of everyone in Washington State. I can say that it is working. Washington State is 46 out of 50 states in terms of cases per 100,000 people. And we were the first place where COVID showed up. So if you look at the curve at the beginning, we were really high, but we have stayed and we have really managed to flatten our curve compared to the rest of the country. And, the campaign can't take all the credit for that, but it can certainly take a portion of the credit for that.
That's awesome. And so obviously something like wearing a mask, there's some people are adamantly against it, and other people see it as they're doing their duty to protect the spread and save lives. So I mean, those are extreme ends of the spectrum. Can we translate the way that you successfully used research and behavioral science to affect change, really? People, no one was wearing masks before this, and now all of a sudden you gotta convince people to either not go out or to wear a mask or to stay 6 feet apart, to follow all these guidelines. Are there lessons that you learned during this campaign about what works so well that maybe we could apply in an organization like we talked about before, that's trying to say, well, we want to shift and change the way that our culture thinks about social good, maybe, for example?
Yeah, I mean, so it's all about, overcoming those barriers. And in the case of masks, there were definitely some barriers around, people wanting free will, people not trusting the messenger that was telling them to wear a mask. et cetera. So one of the key things we did on this campaign, now in Washington State, there's a lot of people that are very receptive and willing to do, what is recommended by public health. But those that aren't receptive, we went in and worked with local messengers that were trusted members of their communities. So one very specific example, we went to a county in Washington that was having a huge spike in cases. And we were able to go into that county and their mask wearing rates were low. We were able to go in and identify local leaders, like local priests, local community leaders. And this county has a lot of Spanish speakers. So it's done in both Spanish and English, and have them go out and encourage mask wearing. And we actually produced ads featuring these locally known folks around wearing masks. And in that particular county, we actually saw this around the state, but when we focused specifically on that county, we saw mask wearing go up and cases go down, because there is a direct correlation after employing that really local trusted messenger approach. So you have to get in people's, we call them referent groups. You have to get within people's referent groups, the people they trust, their peers, rather than having it be, state government is telling you to do this thing.
I think is amazing advice, because that's something you could translate right down. It's not rule with an iron fist and dictate that somebody does good, right?
Yeah.
Or your version of good. It's understanding their objections, meeting them on their level. And I like the idea of partnering or collaborating with people that they trust and respect to usher in change. To that level, when you guys look at brand versus message delivered by a person, do you see a difference in effectiveness? Is it, I'm sure you guys work with a lot of companies on their brand, right? But then we also hear about advocacy and the power of a person delivering a message over maybe a logo, What is there any truth to that it has to maybe be a battle waged? That's too aggressive, but it has to be an effort made on both fronts, not just from a brand perspective, but also on a person to person basis.
I mean, where this works the best is where there's alignment, right? It's like if the brand stands for something, and then you've got a spokesperson, a CEO who is able to personalize it and move it forward, that's the best thing. But where the brand doesn't stand for the thing that the CEO or whatever is talking about, and it creates this thing of like, well, do they do that, or should they be doing that, or how does that work? I think frankly, when we first started, we saw a lot more of that. I feel in general, brands are getting much, much more sophisticated and savvy about having that clear alignment. So it's like, big organizations in particular sectors, the thing that they're doing aligns with their business model, right? So that when you see the brand and you hear from the CEO, you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense that's their contribution, or that's the issue that they're working on.
It's very apparent that you guys are passionate and aligned with what you're doing, passionate about and aligned with what you're doing. Bryan, can you talk to me a little bit about being an entrepreneur and setting yourself up with a successful career that aligns both your passion and your profession?
Yeah. First of all, I would start by answering this question by saying I consider myself super, super lucky. Lucky. I'm lucky that I get to work with Julie. I'm lucky that I get to work with our team, and I'm lucky that I get to work with the clients we have. It is a source of joy and pleasure, and that part is really, I got to get that. I got to say that. The second part of it is that I think that having this career, Julie and I bring a set of hard skills to the table that we've developed working for other people. We saw the ways the agencies were run. We had the client experience, and all we did is we just channeled that into, okay, if we can do it our way, if we can make the decisions, here's how we would do it. Same hard skills, same approach to clients, a little bit different on being specific about the type of client. But like, it's not like we woke up one morning and said we're going to change the way the agencies work. No, that's not what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, how do we take this set of hard skills, these values, and then channel that into a certain set of clients? And then the other thing too is we went after it. Like we pushed hard. We started in a closet, literally. After my wife was like, how much longer are you going to be on our table? Like, is it time for an office? Like, it's nice that you're here and it's great seeing Julie, but yeah.
Like any successful startup though, you have to start in a basement or a garage or in a closet, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just say is that as you get further and further, as we've gotten further and further into this, I think the thing is to be open to the reinvention, to be open to the feedback from employees, to be open to the client feedback, that to make the kinds of pivots. Because the truth of the matter is, the agency that was literally working in a closet with 5 people is really different than what we looked like when we were at 25, and 25 was different than 40. And 40 was different than 60, and 60 was really different than where we are today. I think part of it is that adaptation piece is also like we have these hard skills. We know how important the clients are and our employees are, but it's also like, hey, time to pivot. Like we're hearing the same thing in multiple places. Like we're not going to lock in. Let's keep moving.
Do you find that because you have such a strong foundation, and you basically know your true north as far as the social good component, that that you're better able to pivot and to be agile with ways of working and technologies used, and the peripherals, because your nucleus is so strong? Is that part of the success recipe?
Yeah, I think that helps. But I also think, and I'll echo what Bryan said about like constantly be willing to learn and evolve. That crosses whether or not you're social purpose driven or right. Just that ability. And I think there are leaders that do that, and then there are leaders that don't. So we're in what we call the ego, which is like the ego. Like there's no place for that in being a successful agency. And even though we own this agency, we are very conscious to not let the ego, creep in, because we need to always be changing. We need to always be saying, should we be doing this differently? Did that work? What needs to change? And really focusing on improving all the time, because we can improve and we can get better. And I think, but some agency owners will get stuck in doing things a certain way. But if we don't evolve and grow, we're not going to be successful.
You guys seem like happy, Bryan, you said lucky people who have had some great successes, but is there a component of never quite being comfortable and satisfied that is a component of that evolution of your business, of that growth story?
I think the people who we admire who are really good at this aren't. I think they're always trying to do this better. Like there isn't really a set point, every day you want to make something better. You want your clients to be like, wow, like I didn't see that coming. That was great. Like, how do we do more of that?
So one of the things we often talk about is the 90-10 rule. So like in any business, and this probably applies across sectors, there's 90% of stuff that's going right at any one time, and there's probably 10% of things that are going wrong. And I think the standard is you tend to spend 90% of your time on the 10% that's wrong, where in fact you need to do the inverse. So we try really hard to say you need to put your energy and time investment into, encouraging what's going right and making that better, making that grow and that flourish. And of course you have to fix the problems that are the 10%, but don't let those 10% problems take things over, so you don't have time to focus on the parts that are going right. And it's hard to do, but we try hard.
George, I got to add something into this that I promised myself I would put in here. part of doing this business is getting into a mindset that those clients, they're the most important thing. Like, we are here to be of service. This is the service business, right? We're here to add value, and we are here to be of service. And so, this is something my dad used to say to me, there's an ethos to being of service. And I thought this was a great thing to think about, blah, 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 it goes along. But when the pandemic started, we started to hear from our clients, and there was a real sense of panic and a real sense of fear. And what they were saying was, we need you to lock arms with us and be in this with us. And it brought me back to this part of like, that is truly being of service. Like, you put down what you're working on, you take that call and you say, hey, we're here. I'm here with you right now. Here's 3 things I can do in this hour. Here's another 2 things that I can do by end of the day. And tomorrow I can have this thing in your inbox. And this piece of the challenge that you're facing, which maybe is a giant challenge, we've got you.
I wasn't gonna. I didn't think that this would come back up, but I'm glad you said that, Bryan. I was wondering, do you guys ever say no to a potential client? Do you guys pick clients with purpose?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
And we have those internal conversations because, as you can imagine, there's some gray areas, right? A client will come in and you'll be like, well, this part aligns, but boy, this whole part really doesn't. And then we have to discuss. And we've had some very, very, active conversations with staff about those things, making those choices. I mean, some of them are very easy choices, right? Like, no, we would never work for that. That doesn't align. But on the gray area ones, you have to look at it and think about it and make sure that it makes sense. Because once we take a client, we're all in, right? And we're their partner over time. So we need to make good decisions about which clients we choose to partner with.
Well, I think that really does kind of hit on so many of the different levels that we've been talking about, the authenticity, right? What Bryan just said about really being in lockstep and being a servant to those clients and being able to feel like you can serve them well, and your 90-10 rule, and I mean, just so much of that's important. But I think maybe a little bit like some companies that say they're for social good and maybe aren't. I hear a lot of companies, ours included, that will say we want to say no when it's not right, but we say that with RFPs sometimes, and we're still sending the RFP out. So I think it's a lot easier said than done, and I congratulate you. And I think that, again, the quick rise that you guys have had in growth of your organization, the awards that you've won, I think that those are reflective of that being a good decision. So congratulations for that. If you don't mind, I'd love to finish off with just asking you a couple personal questions just about your success, and the first being, is there a resource that either of you or both of you have utilized over the years that has been kind of instrumental in your growth and in your success?
So I would say that both of us have utilized executive coaches. I don't know, Bryan, if you want to answer this question the same way, but and we've actually, for many of our senior staff, brought on executive coaches, and that's. Say again, we're not saying anyone's doing anything wrong or whatever, but it's with this philosophy that you can always improve and get better. And we, within our environment, we only have so many opinions or ways to look at things, and working with executive coaches and maybe different executive coaches over the years allows you to bring in new perspectives. So I would encourage people to, think of that as really a value add in the equation, potentially for any leader who's trying to get better and do better.
Now, I've been with my executive coach now for it's been a while. I've been with John Nichols has been my executive coach, and I'll be honest with you. When I first started working with him, he was extremely pointed with me, and I think that we were like in the 35 to 40 range, and we were having a lot of challenges. And he said, "Well, look, do you want to just keep doing the same thing?" And I said, "No, bigger, better, blah blah blah." And he said, "Well, what are you doing every day? Like, what are you doing to make that happen?" I was like, "Well, what I did yesterday." And he said, "It's not going to work." So So yeah, I think having an executive coach and listening to your executive coach is good. And then the other thing I would add that has been really helpful is that we're involved in a couple of different organizations where we hear from peer agencies, and that coupled with the executive coaching piece has really made a big difference in our business.
Let's put you both in the executive coach's shoes. If you were mentoring somebody who was looking to grow in their career, what would you advise them on? What wisdom would you pass down?
So I would say relationships matter, and never burn a bridge ever if you can avoid it. So even if there's conflict, there's always a way to come out of conflict with both sides feeling okay, right? And willing to move forward. And, so whatever you can do with employees, with staff, with vendors, whoever it is, clients, never burn a bridge. And if things are going sideways, be direct and honest, figure out why, and get to a good point where everyone's comfortable.
Wonderful. How about you, Bryan?
So I agree with what Julie just said. I'm going to add one other thing, which is I think every day I try and ask myself, am I doing something? Because you can't love every minute, but are you doing at least a couple of things that you're just digging on? And I think the more I ask that question and the more I try and point the kind of work into stuff that brings me personal joy makes a big difference. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really wise, because often we chase that destination, but don't enjoy the journey. And I think if you use the daily reminder, break it down into days. If you can find things to enjoy each day, then I think you're going to be more aware of that journey, right?
George, listen to this. This could be our close. Listen to this.
Okay.
So in the old office, I had a giant poster of Sisyphus, right? Mm-hmm. So for those of you who are listening at home, Sisyphus is the Greek myth, large Greek god who is rolling the boulder up the hill. Mm. And when he gets the boulder to the top of the hill, the boulder rolls back down the hill, and he has to go back down the hill and roll the boulder up the hill. And sorry, my dad's getting a lot of play in here. But my dad and I were in the office looking at the picture of Sisyphus, and you know what? He turns to me and he said, "What's the lesson?" And I said, "Well, I'd be curious to hear." He said, "You got to learn to love the rock, because you're gonna push that thing up the hill every day. You better like that rock."
That is a very good place to wrap this up. This has been an awesome conversation. You guys are refreshing and a joy to talk to. If somebody was interested in learning a little bit more about C+C, or maybe having a conversation about increasing the amount of social good that's being done at their organization, where can they head?
I mean, our website is cplusc.com. So cplusc.com. Check it out. There's an email in there. If they want to shoot us a note, we'd love to talk to them.
Perfect. Well, looking forward to following you guys and the exciting things that you're doing. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast bos.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.